Welcome to the Growth, Grace, and Prosperity Podcast. Join Stewart Heath for down-to-earth conversations with top professionals, entrepreneurs, and leaders who have a story to tell. Let's get rolling.
Hello, everyone. I'm Stewart Heath, CEO and founder of Harvard Grace Capital. I am your host today, and we're very pleased to have Barry Westbrook. He is the CEO of DocAir Building Solutions. I think I said that wrong. And we're going to hear his story today. And Barry, we're very grateful. I know we were just talking. I know it's pretty busy. There have been some storms in the area, and it's making your business busy. Thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Barry, as you think back over your career, is there an event that you would say was a game changer that put you to where you are today as the head of this organization versus perhaps where you thought you were going to be?
Well, growing up on a farm in Kentucky, where I am today is nothing. Well, I didn't have a clue about where I might be. When I was a child, I thought I would be a doctor, but that didn't. As time went on, that didn't happen. As far as a seminal event, I guess, was when we sold the company I worked for previously. I came to Nashville to actually work for this company in 1987, and we built the company up, and I became one of the part owners and one of the principals in the firm. And we decided to sell it somewhere around 2000. I can't remember the exact date, but at that point, then the question was, what am I going to do now? And at the time, I had a certain number of credentials that were fairly unique, one of them being a certified industrial hygienist. And because there was such a demand for indoor air quality services about that time, I kind of just leveraged that. And I also had a colleague that I had worked with, a younger gentleman that I kind of mentored and worked with at the previous company. And he called me up and asked me if I'd ever thought about starting my own company. And I said, yes, of course, I've thought about it. And he wanted to know if I might be interested in throwing in with him as a kind of a junior member. And that's how DocAir became DocAir.
So the junior partner sought you out to be the leader of a company that he wanted to start. Is that right?
Well, he was kind of the catalyst.
Yeah. It's interesting, the number of entrepreneurs that we've talked to just in the few months that we've been doing this. It's approaching 100 or so. And, so many entrepreneurs are just accidental, not what they intended to do, but either they lost their job or they sold a company or something like that. So I find that interesting that hardly any of us got here on purpose. So similar to that question, Barry, is there a time, a bump in the road in your business that you had to navigate? A rough time is that you can share with us, a challenge that you had to overcome?
Well, we've had numerous challenges. I think of personal challenges I think when you go from being an individual consultant to creating a company that's a contracting company, there was an evolution. And I think that I'm one of those people that sees a business around every corner. And sometimes I feel like that I can kind of take people where they may or may not want to go. So you can achieve a lot of things that way, but you can also find yourself in some predicaments that way as well. So we have been a dynamic and evolving company since we found it. And there's a lot of joy and excitement in that. But then there's also a lot of times where you got in over your head, or you had projects that, kind of became more than you could handle. And then we've gone through several economic downturns and challenges over the last, because the DocAir is about 22 years old. So over that period of time, we've had a lot of things happening. And they all affected us. So sometimes they had a funny way of maybe making you better or stronger, but at the time they were very adverse. So I would just say that, if I could name some of the more challenging parts of building a business, I think finding and recruiting talent is one of the most difficult things, especially in the business that we have, because it's a very difficult business for people to get their head around, because we're a applied science company, but then a lot of the work that we do is very mundane. So if you're out in the field and you've got a hoe and a rake and a shovel and all that, it may not sound very glorious, but then there's a lot of science behind what we do. So we need to find folks that kind of have a scientific orientation, but they've also kind of got to get out in the field. And I think that what we're seeing is there's kind of this bifurcation of people coming out of college. You're either like blue collar or you're not. And so that's made it a little tough. And then in the area, we now are a mechanical contractor. So we do commercial plumbing, and well, we do plumbing and HVAC work. Most of the work we're doing right now is larger commercial work. And it's very difficult to find HVAC professionals and plumbers. It's just unbelievable. I don't know where they all went. I think COVID did something really strange. It's like people seem to just disappear.
I have felt the exact same way. I've got three sons that are part of that lost generation. They were in high school when COVID came, and at one stage or another, and so to some extent, the world they thought they were growing into sort of got jerked out from under them. But then again, you match that up with the cultural problems not problems, but the cultural growth that generation has done, and they don't really seem to want to. They don't have any motivation. Don't want to seem to do anything. I've tried to get all of them to go to some sort of a tech school especially HVAC. But they want white collar jobs, but they're not willing to go to college to do what's necessary to get that. So they want to work on their phone or their computer, but at the end of the day, somebody's got to crawl into the crawl space of the building and do the dirty work, and you can make a lot of money doing it. So have a good living at it. So
yeah, and the crawl space is also where a lot of these things happen. There's a lot of technology in the crawl space, and understanding how all that works, moisture management, the wiring and the programming of the equipment. HVAC, I mean, typically people think of kind of not a college educated individual, maybe somebody that really wasn't highly academic focused in high school. However, it is very, very technical.
yes.
And there is a layer of science and understanding how the HVAC should be designed, how it's supposed to work, and how it integrates with the rest of the building systems. That's extremely challenging. And it's rare to find anyone, whether it's an engineer or HVAC professional, that really understands the complete building systems. You may know how to turn an air conditioner on, but do you know how to determine the flows? Do you know how to measure the flows? Do you know how to design the systems to deliver the air in the right quantities and all this kind of stuff? Do you know how to manage moisture? We are right now going through this transition period where the codes are requiring, which they should be, that buildings have a dedicated ventilation system. So over the last several years, since the 1970s, we've been trying to figure out how to make buildings much more energy efficient. And one way to do that is to make them less leaky. When I was growing up, you found yourself sticking, chinks and cracks and holes to try to keep from freezing to death in the wintertime. And now we have much better seals on windows and doors, but at some point you seal up a building to the point where if you don't have a ventilation system, you're going to have an unhealthy building.
Right.
And it's kind of obvious. I call it the Tupperware effect. You can't build a house out of Tupperware and think people are going to do well. But it's interesting that when people say HVAC, most of them will be able to tell you what the V stands for. But ironically enough, especially in the residential arena, there is no V. The only ventilation that people have is what leaks in and out of their house. In a lot of cases, most of their ventilation air comes out of the crawl space, for instance. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for us if we can figure out how to get our message out. We're right now working with a retired allergist, and my thought is that if I've always felt like that the allergists and we ought to be working with them hand in glove because we can create a better indoor environment. And we think that if you can create a better environment, you can reduce your symptomology. That's the theory anyway. I guess the doctor would either agree or disagree. So that's, I think, another challenge is just figuring out how to explain what we do. You know.
Okay. So let me pivot here for a minute. To me, one of the biggest challenges in business, and you've already touched on one, which is recruiting and retaining the best people. I think every business has got that issue right now. But another challenge is, especially for leadership, is staying current. And you know, a lot of us start businesses, and you're very knowledgeable, obviously, about the air quality needs and how to address it. But you're also running an organization, which means recruiting, retaining, leading people. And how do you stay current, both in your industry of air quality as well as in your management techniques? Because as generations change, they, you know, generally management techniques will change. How do you stay current on that? Is it a weekly thing? Is it constant? Do you take time out once a quarter to get caught up? You know, how do you stay current?
It's not quite a disciplined endeavor. I am interested in a lot of different things, so I listen to podcasts, I listen to YouTube videos. I'm constantly, every time I see an ad that comes up about everything you ever wanted to know about something, I'm first one that clicks on it. So that's one way that I do it. So reading, going to seminars. I have in the past been a member of an organization called TAB, the Alternative Board. There are others like that. Trying to remember some of the other ones. I think Vintage is another one that I know that's here locally. But the idea is that if you're particularly a small business, it doesn't have to be a small business, but that you may not have the benefit of kind of a board setting where you have people that are going to push you, ask questions, provide you with expertise in areas of marketing and accounting and all those things. So that was the premise. And it's also a certain amount of collegiality so that you got somebody that you can tell your troubles to that can help, maybe help give you some solutions and that kind of thing. And also, it just turns out to be like part of your family. So that was beneficial. But I go to a lot of seminars. I also do training myself to real estate professionals in the building science arena, trying to get people to understand all the different parts of how the buildings work and how to respond to problems in buildings, especially if you're a property manager and that kind of thing. But I think programs like this is one place I go. I think, when I first started the business, I had 2 or 3 people that asked me the same question. They said, "Have you ever read the E-Myth?" And I was like, "The E-Myth?" And it's like, "No." They said, "You ought to read it." And I thought, they're telling me something. I'm not sure what they're telling me. And I figured it out. And I think what they were trying to tell me was that I was trying to do too many things myself. And that, just going out and doing a bunch of things without, you've got to make sure that you've got the HR hat covered. You've got to have your CEO hat. You've got to have all those things done. So I read the E-Myth and it was an eye opener. it's one of those things where you read it and you're inspired, but you still got to follow through and act. Taking the action and doing the work, of course, it's always the hardest part.
Didn't that come in like 88 or 90 or something like that?
So Michael Gerber was the guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Very famous, fairly short book, if I recall.
You read I'm sure he made plenty of money on it because they would have the E-Myth for attorneys and the E-Myth for engineers and all that kind of stuff. So, but it's a very, it's an eye opener because it's kind of obvious, but at the same time, it's easy to ignore it. But once you realize what you're doing, that you're out here just working as hard as you can, but are you really doing the things you need to do? And are you working on your business instead of just
Exactly. Yeah, just because you are a great plumber does not mean that you can run a plumbing company. And it's completely different skill sets, and that's my big takeaway from it. And I've read it a couple of times over the years. It might be time to reread it again. So very helpful because entrepreneurs tend to be a little on the controlling side or the problem solving side rather than there's another book, it's on my shelf called Who Not How. If you've read that one, it's about it's not how to fix the problem, it's who do you find to fix the problem. So, it's Dan Sullivan. He's written a lot of books, and it's not too tough, but it's I do recommend that one. It's a concept that's not very natural to some of us organizational leaders. So let me pivot to finance for a minute. So one of the questions we like to ask all of our entrepreneurs is what do you do with your investable cash flow? And we're not asking for numbers or account numbers. What we're getting at is what asset classes do you like to invest in from the spoils of your business, and are you locking it all up in CDs, or are you just depressed today because the market's down another 2,200 points today? So what do you do with your investable cash?
Well, I am an optimist. And as I said, I'm always looking at business opportunities, and I've learned that I need to probably discipline those ambitions some because you can get out over your skis doing that as well. My wife is so I'm essentially a partnership since I'm married, more or less, and she happens to be an extremely conservative, risk averse person. So it's interesting because I am exactly the opposite. I'm kind of like, go for it. And I see a business around every corner. So most of our assets are tied up with certainly our personal residence, but we have a investment account that's managed, and it's done very well. And of course, it has a diverse portfolio. And then we have also invested in some little property, like the HPR construction, the horizontal property regime, where you scrape off the old house and you put two new houses there. So we've done some of that with partners. We haven't actually done that ourselves personally, but
right.
And then back when I first got out of college, I was a construction superintendent myself. So I built several homes back in the old days. I built a passive solar home for the Farmers Home Administration up in Kentucky. I think it was the first one of its kind. This was back in 1981, a long time ago. And I built several houses, including my own personal house once upon a time. So I've been in construction a little bit, been in plumbing a little bit. I'm kind of jack of all trades in that sense.
Do you have other businesses now other than DocAir?
No, some investments, but DocAir is pretty much the umbrella. there are a lot of quote businesses under DocAir in a sense, because we do a lot of different things, like for instance, we do stormwater, radon, mold remediation, environmental assessments. I do some consulting in some diagnostic work for insurance companies. I also do a little bit of professional witness work, not a lot, but some. And what else? And I still do some industrial hygiene work for industries where I'll go out and do noise monitoring and that kind of thing. But that's really just a revenue stream, but it's not DocAir business. That's not a focus of it.
Gotcha. All right. Well, thank you for that. All right. Last question. Barry, if you were mentoring someone, or if someone just wanted to follow in your footsteps as a successful entrepreneur, what one piece of advice would you give them?
That is a difficult question.
You can give more than one piece of advice.
A rich question. It is a difficult. I would say preparation. One thing that I did, which I think was beneficial, is I got involved with SCORE, that has for the Small Business Administration. I had a mentor who worked with us and advised and all that, and he became a friend and a customer and a mentor. So I felt like anytime that you can go out and get relationships are good. The other thing that I would do is try to make as many connections as possible, and I guess it depends also on your skill sets and what you like to do. But being able to go out and tell your story, if you do like seminars and that kind of thing, is great. And but I think the thing that really makes a business go is it's a lot of work. If you're starting a business because you don't want to do as much work, then you're probably going to lose. I just started a business. Well, it's probably a hobby. It's not a business, because, it's just so much work, and also the stresses. As my old boss used to tell us, it's like all of the money we get comes from our customers. It's like there is no magic money, and when you understand that your success is going to rise and fall with what you do, it's kind of scary sometimes.
I read an article last year. It was about the correlation of adult ADD in the general population versus the subset of entrepreneurs. And entrepreneurs about 12 times more likely to have adult ADD. And I'm just like, and which was so funny, it stuck with me because I've joked for years that I love adult ADD. It helps me to multitask with all the different things that I'm doing. And so what the article's really saying, because ADD is listed as a form of mental illness. So what we're really saying is most entrepreneurs are mentally ill. So, and I was, yeah, okay, I'll own that. So, yeah, there ain't, you got to love it. You got to do it because you want to do it. Yeah, because you're loving it. So I think that was great advice, Barry. Yeah. And I do think that the entire world turns on relationships. And really since 2000, everything's been digital, and people have been successful making millions in some cases, on the internet, really never meeting a customer. But that's not most businesses. Almost everything's relationships, and so I think that's well said. So once again, thank you for your time today. If people would want to reach out and contact you, how would they do that?
Well, hopefully they wouldn't have any trouble. That goes back to how good a marketer we are. But if you type in DocAir and you don't get to DocAir on the internet machine, then something's wrong. But certainly they can email me at bwestbrook. It's pretty simple, bwestbrook@docair.com. And if you have any kind of peculiar building quirk or question about air quality or whatever, people feel free to call me because I'll be glad to help them.
We'll make sure your email address is a link in the show notes, so it'll make it easy for people to reach out. Again, Barry, anybody with that C-level title we know has no time, so we appreciate you sharing some of yours with us. So thank you for joining us today. And thank you to the audience for watching this episode of the Growth, Grace, and Prosperity podcast. Please look out for another one. Appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to the Growth, Grace, and Prosperity podcast. If you'd like to be a guest, visit growthgraceprosperity.com/guest. We'd love to hear your story.